everybody, hope you're doing okay and welcome to my cabin once again. I would like to tell you I've gone somewhere interesting, but I'm on 2 weeks quarantine, having been to Portugal, so I hope it is. So I thought, as I'm still injured, although my calf is feeling a bit better and I was walking around a bit better earlier on today, I thought I'd do a review of all my sort of tempo inverted commas shoes. Now, I was struggling to sort of see what sort of description to use for these sort of shoes, but I'm kind of using for a broad description of shoe that's not a carbon racing plated shoe, nor is some ultra minimalist thing, or nor is it like an everyday sort of heavy getting the miles done trainers. So in actual fact, when I looked at all my shoes, I've got probably more of these type of shoes than any other one. So let's have a look at the sort of shoes that I'm talking about, and then we'll get into them. So here they all are. I've laid them out on my treadmill. So I've basically got 14 shoes that I'm going to look at, of which 12 different pairs, because I've got 3 of the Turbo 2s. So in most shoe comparison videos, you might get a comparison of 2 shoes. So you're going to get a good value for money here, because I can talk about 12 shoes in one video. So let's go through each of the ones. So starting at the end there, that's the green pair of Turbo 2s in the UK 13. I've got the Adios 4 there from Adidas. I've included shoes which aren't necessarily the current version, because I see you can still buy them. I've got the Hyperion Tempo there from Brooks in a UK 13. Oh, the Adidas 4 was in a 12.5, by the way. I've got the Saucony Endorphin Speed in a 13. I've got the Adios 5, which is the later version to the Adios 4, of course, also in a 12.5. I've got the New Balance TC, that white pair there. I've got another pair of the Turbo 2s, they're the second pair I had. And then I've got this sort of pinky red pair there are the Boston 9s from Adidas. And then the black pair there are the ASICS ROADBLAST, they're in a 12. The Nike Turbo 2s were another 13, and the Adidas was a 12.5 as well. Then I've got the Nike Tempo Next Percent, also in the UK 13, that's my normal Nike size. And I've got this black pair there is the Adidas SL20 in the 12.5 again. That's the biggest they do. And then I've got the HOKA Rincon. I know there is now a Rincon 2, but I've heard the Rincon 1 and the Rincon 2 are so similar, I thought it was fair to include the Rincon 1 in this review. And that's in the UK 12.5. And then we've got this blue pair here, is the Nike Zoom Fly 3. That's also in the UK 13, my normal Nike size. And then coming back full circle, this is another pair of the Nike Turbo 2s. That's the SE version. I think it's just a few sort of extra stripes and stuff here and there and everywhere. And again, it's in the UK 13. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about each one in turn. I'm going to start off with my 12th favourite shoe, or my least favourite shoe, and work all the way up to the first one. Now, you always have to say a caveat with these sort of reviews. This is very much my personal opinion of how these shoes work out for me. There may be some shoes, I think some of my early sort of least favourite choices, people will think are great, but I mean, I can only talk about how they work for me and not about how they might work for somebody else. So hope you appreciate my honest opinions, and let's get stuck in. Okay, hello, so here we are starting off with my least favourite shoe of these 12, and regular viewers of my channel might think I'm a bit of a Nike fanboy. Well, just to show that sometimes I am not, this is the Nike Zoom Fly 3. Now, why is this such an unpopular one for me? Well, first of all, in my size, the UK 13, it comes in at a whopping 365 grams, which is the heaviest of all these shoes that I'm talking about today. And that sort of puts it on a par very much with sort of an everyday trainer like the Pegasus 37, which is also not exactly one of my favourites either. But I think for this one as well, it just sort of feels so odd to run in. It feels like really sort of like you've sort of thrown forward. It always feels a bit like I'm wearing a boot. Now, I think we've talked about it with people like Andy, the Forest Gym runner, who's also got very large sizes. But these React shoes that Nike do just don't seem to scale well into the large sizes. So for the shoe that's meant to be one that's going fast in, I always really struggle to go fast in a shoe that is so heavy. So that's why it's number 12. So moving on to number 11, and this is the HOKA ONE ONE Rincon. Now, I think this is a shoe that's well loved by lots of people, but I just didn't really get on with it. Maybe it's the fact it's only a 5mm drop, and I'm more used to sort of more like a 10mm drop. I just found it sort of rather a flat shoe. I think it sort of felt like it lacked some arch support. Maybe I should have tried it with a different insole, but I do sort of feel I need a bit more under my arch these days, and I just feel like I was running along slap, slap, slap. I mean, the plus point is actually the lightest of all these shoes I've gone to test today. It literally comes in at 263 grams, which isn't that much more than X percent, only about 10 grams more than X percent. So as a shoe that you could potentially use for some fast-paced running, even races, it should in theory be ideal, but I just never feel that I had much love for it. I've taken it up to 42 miles, and I do intend to give it a bit more of a go, but just one that I just didn't really feel that was for me. So the next one up at number 10 is the ASICS ROADBLAST. Now, I can't say this is a bad shoe, but I just don't find it a particularly exciting shoe. I guess it's probably more of a budget shoe. I mean, I got it because I'd got on well with the Nova Blast as more of an everyday shoe, which isn't in this category that I'm looking at today. And I was kind of expecting to be sort of like a super dupe lightweight version of that, and it wasn't quite that. It was okay, but I just didn't feel that exciting to run in it, and it's a bit of an uninteresting colourway as well, isn't it? So I got about 40 miles in it. I think I did a couple of 10-mile runs in it. It's not bad. When I picked up the pace, there was some sort of feeling underfoot, but just had the feeling it wasn't the most responsive of foams, because it had the flight foam blast that was in the Nova Blast, but also mixed with another cheaper foam as well. So didn't really feel anything like the Nova Blast on foot. But yeah, not a bad shoe for if you want to sort of get one under £100. And the weight's not bad. It's just over 300 grams at 303 grams. In fact, it's almost an identical weight to my Alpha Flies. But got quite a few good shoes in this category, so number 10 it has to be for this one. So next up at number 9 is the Brooks Hyperion Tempo. Now, as you might have seen my review of the Brooks Hyperion Elite 2, maybe my love for Brooks at the moment isn't great. I thought this shoe was okay, but it's a bit wide for me. As you can see, I've got the tongues are very close together. I had to pull this one in a lot. And to get a bit like the Rincon, it just feels really flat to me to run. I just felt there was no arch support there. I know the sponge was quite nice. It just felt like it was much sort of excitement to it. So I was running along, a bit of a slap feeling to it. And compared to some shoes, say like the Next Percent, you just feel like it was all you having to do all the work. So it's still quite an expensive shoe as well. I think it's about £140. So for the price, it didn't seem to be that great. I've only run about 30 miles in it so far. I did find that it was possibly might fill a niche for me on some old railways in the summer, because it is a very light shoe, although bizarrely my left shoe is 281 grams and the right one is 274. So if I was wearing a stride, I'd have to put my stride on the right foot. Anyway, so yeah, not a bad shoe, but wasn't really one that worked out for me that great. I'll continue to use it, I think, but not one of my favourites. So next up at number 8, we've got the Nike Air Zoom Tempo Next Percent. A bit of a mouthful. I think there's a Flyknit on the end there as well. Don't forget that. So this is a shoe that's probably divided more opinion than any other shoe this year. I mean, initially I was rather underwhelmed with it. I had a slightly better run in a shoe off shortly after, but I probably haven't done enough running in it yet. But the big problem for me is just so heavy. It's just fractionally lighter than the Zoom Fly 3, so it becomes the second heaviest shoe on test here. That's a lot of weight for me to carry around. This is 353 grams in my size, which is a whole 100 grams heavier than the Next Percent. So if I'm trying to run a sort of decent pace, trying to log around 100 grams more, it's quite a challenge. I mean, if you consider that most shoes in sort of normal sizes are around 200 grams, you try sort of putting 50% of the weight into your shoe and see if that feels as good. That's the sort of thing that we have to contend with in these large sizes. And often the amount of react is often the problem in these sort of shoes that just seems to add to the bulk. It is, however, a shoe that I want to give a lot more testing to when I recover from my calf injury, and it may go up in my estimation. So, but at the moment I can't really rank it any higher just because of the initial feel of it. But as I said, I'm keen to try it a bit more. Okay, at number 7 is the Adios 4. This is the slightly older version, although I see if the Adidas website you can still actually buy it in pretty much all sizes, so I thought it was worth including. I've done about 60 miles in this one. The difference of the Adios 4 here to the Adios 5, that this is all a boost shoe, so that's all boost in the midsole and heel there. Now I sort of wondered about including this one, because really the Adios is traditionally a racing shoe, but I think these days I couldn't really put it into my carbon fibre plated racing shoe comparison, because it's obviously not a carbon fibre plated shoe. I don't really have any other shoes to have a worthwhile category in, and it is a shoe these days that has been rather bypassed by the likes of the Next Percent. So although it was a shoe that I did my marathon race in 2016, and actually ran 2:53, a few minutes quicker than I did this year in 2:56 in the next percent. I think that these days the technology has moved on, and though these are sort of nice shoes to run in, they're not quite what they were. And also this one, the Adios 4, I'm marking it down below the Adios 5 because the fit's not so great. It just comes up a bit small for me. And as you may have seen from another video, I'm really struggling in Adidas because they don't do shoes any more than a 12.5, and really I need at least a 13. So this is a bit of a tight squeeze. So I'm kind of marking it down on the fact that Adidas don't actually cater for me as well. But I do love Adidas. And in fact, the Adios 1 was one of my favourite shoes in the last 10 years, and I've still got a pair that I'm sort of, I haven't done many miles in and maybe use on a rainy day. But anyway, so this one is sort of in the middle. Good shoe, but I think these days they just are better around. So moving along to number 6, and I thought I would put the two Adios versions side by side. And I just sort of had to decide which one I preferred out of the 4 and the 5. I think I prefer the 5 just because the fit is a bit better. There's a bit more room in the toe box and just fractionally longer, so I just feel a bit more comfortable in it. Compared to the Adios 4 that I've just shown you, you've got boost here in the heel, but you've got this light strike layer over the top. So I've done about 60 miles in this one, the same as the Adios 4. And again, it's a shoe that I quite like, but again, I'm sort of struggling to see the real purpose for it now because I wouldn't really use this for a race anymore. The one thing I might use it for racing, if it was like a sort of a trail race with a bit of mud in, because I think something like the next percent then would be a bit too unstable through mud, and probably the high stack height wouldn't be great. Having said that, I did actually do a trail race in next percent in the summer. Obviously, it was a lot drier then. So I might do a turn from that. The Adios 5 is marginally heavier than the Adios 4 by about 10 grams. So this Adios 5 comes in for me at 276 grams in a UK 12.5, whereas the Adios 4 was slightly lighter at 267 grams. So moving along to number 5, and this is the Adidas Boston 9, and probably the brightest colour that I've got on shoe today, a nice sort of pinky red. This is the shoe that in previous versions I've used as my sort of daily trailer come anything shoe for years and years and years. I stopped using it from the Boston 6 when it just got too small. As I've mentioned, the UK 12.5 is as big as they do, and if the 12.5, which is already a bit small for me technically, then comes up smaller than that, and I'm basically a whole size down on where I should be. So I kind of then jumped ship then and actually moved to Nike. So, but then when I sort of tried these Adidas ones again, they did actually come up a bit better. Now the Boston 9 is actually a fully boost shoe, which probably shows why it's slightly heavier than some of the other ones in the Adizero range. This pair I've got, the Adidas Boston 9, are one of the strange shoes where the left and the right are somewhat different. The left one comes in at 299 and the right at 292. So again, I put my stride on the right foot. I'm going to use this one. It's quite a nice shoe to run in, this one. Nice sort of cushioning for sort of steady runs up to about 10 miles. I think it just wouldn't have quite enough cushioning compared to some of the other shoes I wanted to go much further, especially on the road. So that's probably why I've only put it at number 5. But it's a very versatile shoe. And with this sort of excellent continental grip, you can certainly get out on some light trails with it. And it's one of these shoes that could certainly be a contender for a much do-everything shoe, because you can run fast in it, you can run slow in it, you can run on different types of surface, and you get a reasonable grip in the wet. So moving on to number 4 in my list of favourite sort of tempo inverted commas shoes. This is the only New Balance shoe on test today. This is the Fuelcell TC, where TC stands for training competition. Now technically this is actually a carbon fibre plated shoe, but I didn't put it into my carbon fibre racing shoes video because it's not really a racing shoe, so it's much more of a tempo shoe. It doesn't actually say it's a tempo shoe, but it's still got the T for training, and quite similar to the ones that are actually called tempo. Slightly heavier than a lot of the shoes on test today. This one actually comes into me at 327 grams in the left shoe. The right one's 329, so that's a reasonably closer than some others. But you certainly do feel that extra weight, but it's got an extremely soft midsole and quite a thick one. I mean, it is really much sort of in the traditional sort of the high stack shoe. When I first put it on, it reminded me quite a lot of the 4% feeling, very soft feeling. And I felt it was a bit too soft, and I'm wondering that it almost had a bit of a sinking feeling each time. So it certainly didn't feel instantly. It was as good as the sort of 4% and next percent from a sort of go fast point of view. But I actually got out and did several half marathon training runs in it. And I think even though perhaps I didn't intend to, I actually sort of ended up running sort of reasonably quickly. It wasn't quite at marathon pace, but it certainly wasn't a decent clip. Maybe it was one of those runs that you were guilty of running faster than you should have done, but it certainly helped you to get going. One downside about it, which might be a plus point for some people, I found it quite wide. And if you noticed here that the tongues are really almost touching. Another problem I had, which you can hopefully just about see there, I've got a slight tear in the tongue. Hope it doesn't get any bigger, but just something to be slightly aware of. So I think this shoe is kind of like my sort of ideal sort of tempo-ish, long-runish shoe. I would say it's probably best suited for sort of that sort of run. It doesn't feel quite so good just sort of going out for short, easier pace runs. And perhaps the sort of the carbon plate and all that softness is almost a bit too much. But certainly a good shoe from New Balance, and one that I've enjoyed running in it and will continue to do so. In fact, I've almost got this one to 100 miles. I'm just sort of struggling to get any more miles in at the moment because of my calf injury. But I think if I do one more run, I'll skid it above 100 miles. Okay, so now moving into the top three and starting to get some quite good shoes now. This is the Adidas SL20. Now, I think I put this one as my favourite ones of the Adidas, although there's not really a huge amount between them. They do serve slightly different purposes, with the Adidas, as I mentioned, really being more of a sort of a shoe for a race if you wanted to not use one of your carbon fibre plated shoes. But I kind of like this one because it's quite a cheap shoe relatively, and you can often pick it up for bargain prices. I mean, I've seen people picking it up for as low as £60, if not less. And I think I had a sort of discount from Adidas when I got it from new, and I got it well under £100. So in that sense, it's quite good value. And it's quite sort of soft on feel. It's a totally light strike shoe. So as you've sort of seen, the Adidas seems to be almost experimenting with light strike shoes, boost shoes, or a bit of both, trying to work out what is their ideal combination for their more sort of reasonably priced shoes as opposed to the Adidas Pros and those sort of ones. As a result of that, it feels like a reasonably soft feeling on foot. I've actually run quite a lot of miles relative to this one, got it over 150 miles. And it's also a shoe that you can really do any sort of pace in. So I used to do my city strides running sort of slowly around dead ends. And I also did like a 10-mile tempo run one time. So certainly a shoe that is you can take out for any sort of run you like. And of course it's got the traditional Continental rubber on the background, so it's going to be good for some light trails as well. And I think also, although if you looked at it compared to the Boston 9 and the SL20, there's not really a huge amount in it in terms of performance, but I think just because of the fact that this is somewhat cheaper and it's lighter. This one actually comes in at 269 grams, which is the third lightest shoe of the ones on test, and only the Adios 4 and the Rincon are slightly lighter. So number 2 on my list is probably a shoe that's often number 1 in many other people's lists, is the Saucony Endorphin Speed. Now, I think this is a great shoe. It's very similar to the Endorphin Pro, both in weight and feel, and it almost looks the same. It's almost built exactly the same. I think the real difference is that the Pro's got the carbon plate in it, and this has got more of a nylon plate. I think the good thing about this shoe from a sort of plate point of view is you don't really feel there is a plate in it. I mean, I only feel that there's a plate in it because it says so on the side of the box. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't know. It's quite sort of a soft feeling. And the fact it's a reasonably high stack shoe means you get a lot of cushioning underfoot. I've now got this one to 125 miles, and I've sort of used it pretty much all paces. I mean, I was using it sort of to warm up for my track races, as well as going out for 15-mile long runs in it a few times and a few things in between. I've also done a few flat-out short Strava segment attempts, which I was successful at. So it's certainly a shoe that can really go from almost sprinting to marathon pace to long run pace to casual pace, pretty much wherever you like. So you might think, well, why is it not number 1? Well, partly because the shoe I'm going to show you in a minute is the shoe that I've run the most miles in by far of all these ones. So that in alone is probably a good thing. And perhaps I'm slightly dubious of its ability to be a good shoe off-road, because as you can see, I've got a white shoe here, and it was a good shoe for the summer. But I just sort of felt sometimes that the higher stack height made it slightly more unstable if you were looking for a slightly uneven road. But it's a pretty close thing between this and the one I'm sure I'm going to mention in a minute. So I'd certainly recommend you checking this one out if you can get it, because it's been one of those shoes that's been very hard to get hold of. And I had to order this one from America, in fact. So that cost me quite a lot. But certainly, having spent a lot of money in getting it, I did feel it was a worthwhile investment. So I didn't regret doing that. So moving on to my number one inverted commas tempo shoe, and this is the shoe that I've actually run more miles in the 3 pairs than all the other ones put together. I've actually got 3 pairs of these and totaling 785 miles over the 3. The first one I got was the green pair behind me on the treadmill. That got me up to 375 miles. I think I've pretty much retired that one now. And then I got this one, the black and pink one, second, and I've done 186 miles in this one so far. And the black one is the SE Special Edition one, which isn't really anything special about it in terms of anything different. It's just got some slightly different stripes and stuff, and it's all black, so it's quite good for a bit of a casual shoe if you need to sort of wear something sleek to go somewhere and then need to run home, say. And in that one, I've actually done 226 miles. So what do I like about the Turbo 2? Well, I think it's one of those shoes that's pretty much a sort of do-it-all shoe. I mean, if you ask me what shoe would be the one shoe that I would want to take away or could only have for a week's running, I think it would be this, because it's quite easy to run in slow paces. You've got the mixture of the React and ZoomX foams. You can see the sort of dual density layer there, and as there's no carbon plate in it, you don't really get that sort of feeling that you're sort of needing to push on and you're running on something that's really quite firm and stiff. So you can sort of take it on the road, you can take it on a light trail, and it all seems to be quite adaptable. Anything I would say, if it gets wet, then you're going to get rather sod on it, but that's like the same with any other shoe, isn't it? And also the fact for me, it actually fits me quite well. Although I've got quite a lot of folding in the top here, I've actually managed to get my midfoot down really nice and secure, and actually opens out a bit in the toe box. So I quite like that now in a shoe. I like to have a very nice lockdown feel because I've got a very narrow foot, but then I do appreciate having a bit more room in the toe box. Something like the Rincon is kind of almost like a sort of a straight line, so it sort of feels narrow, but it also sort of remains narrow in the toe box. So you feel like having got a good lockdown in the middle, then you feel like you could do with a bit more room on top. Whereas this one like nicely spreads out, and I've got like a full thumb width at the top here, and also I feel like my feet can spread out a bit, which some days, if it's like a non-racing type shoe, then it's kind of what you feel you need. Having said that, I mean, I've done pretty much everything. I'm going to run full marathons in training in this shoe, as well as sort of doing short sprints, Strava segment blast. So that's pretty my good definition of a shoe. Can you sprint in it and can you do a very long run in it? Well, yes, you can. And if you can do that, you can basically do anything in between. So it's one of the few shoes, apart from the Next Percent, that I've actually got more than one pair of in recent years. So that in itself is a good sign. It does appear to be on their way out. Well, at the moment, I noticed on the Nike website, they've actually got a pair available in all sizes, at least the one I last checked, although still at full price. So with so many shoes to test and sort of check out, I haven't yet got a new pair. I'm seriously considering if I should, because I think if I don't get one now, I might miss out. But then again, you think, well, if I get one more pair, I'm going to have the same problem again. So sometimes if you like a shoe, but it's not going to be continued in any shape or form, then you think you're just going to move on. And I think the reason why the Endorphin Speed is number 2, because it actually feels the closest to this one. So if I wanted a shoe to replace this one, then I think the Endorphin Speed will be a close second. I perhaps might need to get a black pair of the Endorphin Speeds though if I'm going to use it over the winter, because that's going to get very black very soon anyway. So I hope you enjoyed this look at all my tempo shoes, come sort of lightweight-ish shoes, come sort of not absolutely flat out shoes to not absolutely dead slow shoes. I mean, one thing I would say that if I wanted to do a sort of a tempo run and was really gunning for it, I'll just pick probably one of my carbon fiber plated shoes. So there is an element that does a tempo shoe really serve a purpose when you just use one of your racing shoes. But it also, they do sort of, to me, serve a purpose of almost an everyday shoe, because I do prefer to run in slightly lighter shoes than some of these clumpy, heavier ones. I'll do that in another video, but I have a lot less shoes to talk about. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed looking at this, and I've almost got to 1,000 subscribers, or at least I will have hopefully in a month or so's time. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd be very appreciative if you could click the button to do so, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Okay, bye.